Greetings, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on what messages will inspire prospects to act now. This is Rob Love with Love & Company. We'll do our full introductions in just a couple of moments. But as people still are logging in and joining us, we're going to go ahead and start with just an overview of some of the basics for how things will work today. As I believe most of you have experienced in webinars, we're going to save the questions and answers till the end of the presentation, but you're welcome to ask your question at any point and we will queue them up and have them ready to go. And you'll do this by, if you click the little triangle that opens in your GoToWebinar control panel that opens the questions section, you'll see this area near the bottom where you're able to type in your question. Go ahead and do that. Click send, and it will appear here where we can see it. So again, you're welcome to do that throughout the presentation. Well, one of the most common questions we always have is, can we get a copy of the presentation? And the answer to that is yes. Everyone who's attended today and everyone who registered but was not able to attend, we will send a link to the full recording of the presentation so that you have it and that you can share it if needed, desired. Hopefully you think that's a good idea with other members of your organization. All right, so we have a little different approach for today's webinar than a lot of what we've been doing for the last year or two, in that we have invited a guest presenter from outside of senior living. This is actually something that we've heard from people who have attended our webinars in the past that they'd like to see a little bit more of, get some insights on marketing and communications from outside senior living, so we're not quite so insular. So we're really excited today to have Joe Kleiber, whose company focuses on the educational field, join us, and we hope you'll gain a lot from that as well. We'll start by laying out some situational parallels as to how many of the challenges that we are facing in senior living marketing today are very similar to the things that educational marketing is facing. From that, we'll go into messaging strategies. How should our community's messaging evolve, reflecting where we are and what we're learning and how our prospects' mindsets are changing during these times? From that, we'll go into, once you've defined a message, how do you best communicate it? And then we'll leave you with some actionable takeaways. So that's our game plan for today. And again, we will do the Q&A at the end. So it's my pleasure and honor to introduce you to Joe Kleiber. Joe's been a friend for, I believe, 20 or more years now, Joe. And for most of that time, if not all of that time, Joe has had his own business, Creosote Effects, which focuses on the educational marketing field. So Joe, could you take just a little bit and provide some insight on yourself and your company?
Thank you, Rob, and thank you to Love & Company for the opportunity to participate in today's webinar. I have long recognized the commonalities between education and senior living, and maybe more specifically, the strategies that effectively engage both our audience. I'm Joe Kleiber. I'm principal of Creosote Effects. We specialize in educational marketing and branding, and that entails work with schools really of just about all kinds, independent day and boarding schools, as well, of course, as colleges and universities all over the country. So thanks again, Rob. Pleasure to be with you today.
Thanks, Joe. Dan, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, I'm Dan Rexford. I'm VP of Marketing Innovation at Love & Company. And before I go any further, I just want to thank you for all you're doing, particularly if you're in the community side. We know how tough it is, how much you're doing for the residents, their families, and their associates. So thank you. I work with the creative team, and then I try to scan the senior living field, but also other fields in sales and marketing to bring the best techniques forward.
Great, thanks, Dan. And again, I'm Rob Love. I'm the president and owner of Love & Company. And for those of you that may be new to our webinar series, Love & Company is a firm that for almost 25 years now has specialized in the senior living marketing and sales field. And we provide a full range of marketing related services, from market research and consumer research and market analysis, demographic analysis, through to marketing planning, the whole creative side that Dan leads, lead generation, brand development, and the sales side, helping develop and coach sales teams how to respond to whatever the sales challenges may be, including how to evolve the sales message and sales process for the COVID world. All right, so you know, some of you may be out there wondering, so what does educational marketing have to do with senior living? Why have we looked to this to bring Joe in today? And while I hate to be the one that always, you know, points out the obvious, the fact is we're both targeting the same audience, seniors. Now, our seniors tend to be on the older end of the spectrum, and Joe's seniors tend to be high school seniors. But okay, that was the humor for today. But actually, seriously, as we've already suggested, there are a lot of parallels between the kinds of challenges. Think about what we're doing in senior living. We are asking people to leave where they are and move to a new location with a new group of people into a new environment. And that's exactly what's happening in the majority of the educational kinds of environments in which Joe is working with. So Dan, could you start us off, and how are you and we seeing a lot of the challenges within the senior living field?
Right. So obviously prospects are fearful. There's no question about that, but they might not be as fearful as you think. We surveyed one of our clients' lead bases. We developed a survey, and we found that 30% said that they were very concerned about the virus. So that struck me as a little bit lower than I would have thought. And that concern was not related to joining the community. The fact is that the difference between the percentage of people who said that they were planning on joining the community before the advent of the pandemic and who it is now only diminished by 11%. So the fact is they are fearful, but if you address that right, as we'll talk about, you can overcome that. There's obviously a tremendous amount of negative press, particularly probably strongly in our field than in the one Joe works with. And, you know, confusion over the category and associations with, you know, just skilled nursing and people not understanding the differences. Economic uncertainty, there is that concern. We'll talk a little bit more about how to address that, though. The fact is our prospects may not have a real accurate picture of that. The economic uncertainty may not be as strong as they think. There are questions about what we can deliver. You know, if I can't come for all those social things, you know, that's a question that we have. There's a growing recognition, and some of the leaders in the field are saying this doesn't go away. So how are we going to deal with it in the future? And then the budget pressures are severe. Certainly, you know, providers are paying for PPE. Providers are paying for testing. I heard of one provider whose testing protocol is $100,000 a week. You're paying for bonuses, you're paying for overtime. So there's budgetary pressures, and there's a natural reflex action to actually cut back on sales and marketing. I imagine many of you are in sales and marketing who are in the audience today, and you're feeling that. Joe, do you want to tell us a little bit about the educational side?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. You know, I think the area where I'd like to just draw attention to would be the real questions about what can be delivered right now, given the pandemic and the circumstances every school is facing. And I think the real questions revolve around the ability for schools to still communicate their value amidst diminished student experience. You know, I think this is a key parallel here for both our industries, where lots of the benefits of being part of a community are suddenly restricted for social distancing and things like that. And And that, puts incredible pressure on the organizations to continue to communicate in a way that demonstrates value when you're faced with all of these restrictions, and not being able to rely on your long-standing differentiators that you could build solid messaging and campaigns around. So, I think the key warning here for everyone is, you don't want to lose pricing power in what it is that you deliver to the market. And there's quite possibly considerable demand destruction occurring, at least within education. So a recent survey of college freshmen, more than 1,800 freshmen were surveyed, and about 40% acknowledge that they are likely not to attend college this fall, which is obviously a huge number. Now, the return of students has occurred, whether they're remote learning or back in person. But the deposits in our admissions world are still not tallied. So, the numbers will come to play, I think, here very soon as to whether or not a lot of students took a gap year this year because it's not the experience that they want. I think moving into another key parallel is the societal issues and the conversations. Watch the political conventions right now, both Democratic and Republican, and DEI is part of the conversation that our government is having with us as citizens. And this is really huge in education, and I'm expecting that if it's not already really important to senior living, it will be soon, primarily because these conversations are really important to the market that we serve. And that is those seniors, Rob, the senior who is of older age than our high school seniors or college seniors. But, for schools, education is being asked to play an important role in this conversation. Everything around Black Lives Matter and that movement, LGBTQ conversations, the Me Too movement, all of this is really important, and it does definitely impact your messaging moving forward.
Thanks, Joe. And while I agree from our conversations, I think that these issues may be much greater in the educational field. They're definitely part of senior living as well and growing in importance. In particular, diversity is something that our field has really begun trying to wrestle with these past several years, and have not made a lot of progress yet, but a lot of people are focusing, paying attention, and see where we can go on it. A couple of years back, Love & Company did our own research report on diversity in senior living and explored a number of things there, trying to figure out where the answers are. And one of the key things is it's not going to be easy to get there. There are a lot of factors there which go beyond where we are today. But certainly addressing diversity and addressing how our field, particularly the life plan community side of things, can serve a broader range of the aging population is certainly an important discussion. In many, many of our communities, I'm sure this won't come as any surprise to most of the people on our webinar today, our resident population is on average maybe 99% plus Caucasian, while particularly in urban areas, our staff may be 50% or more people of color of various national origin and races. So how do we bring all this in line over time and appeal to a broader range of people? And I think Black Lives Matter is starting to touch our field as well. I've been talking with several CEOs over the last several months about diversity, equity, inclusion, and things they're doing, and talked with some about how that movement has affected their communities. And you know, there was a very high awareness of all the rallies, all the demonstrations, everything that was going on, during that time a few months ago, during the peak, probably late June. Now, given where we were in the pandemic, communities had a lot of residents that would have chosen to go participate and share their voice in this, but really couldn't because of rules around, leaving the community. And staff also, really wanted to go participate and be seen and heard in this, but because of their commitment to the communities, chose not to because that would, increase the risk that they might introduce to the community. But these are very much challenges that we need to be, addressing as a field more and more as we move forward.
So one thing, we all just have to take a little bit of a deep breath, and on the sales and marketing side, particularly, there's a lot of things we cannot control. We're not going to be able to, reverse all the negative press. We're not going to be able to assuage everybody's fears. We're not going to be able to inspire everybody to join the community. We're just not going to be able to address all of these issues. But if we take a deep breath, focus, as we're going to talk about, we can still have success. And we're seeing people move in, substantial numbers of people, particularly this summer. They took a break during the early stages, but during the summer. So take a deep breath and focus, I think, would be my message.
Great, thanks, Dan and Joe. So over the past several months, a very high proportion of the messaging that has come out of our communities has been necessarily and appropriately focused on how we're protecting residents. This is the environment that we're providing, the things that we're doing. And absolutely that's what was needed. But as we look to the future and we see the evolving mindset of our prospects and what they're seeing and how they're thinking about things, we need to evolve in our messaging as well to move from being what, unfortunately, I'm going to use the word generic. In many cases, many communities across the country use a fairly similar generic messaging of, we provide, residential living and dining and housekeeping, and you can have the time to focus on the things you love. And we all sort of tell that same story. There's not only an opportunity, but a need now to elevate that story and take it to a different level. So that's what we're going to explore next. So I jokingly said earlier that, hey, we both target seniors, right? But the actuality is that what Joe does in his marketing and what we do in ours, there actually is an overlap in the market, and that's that middle part. So Dan, go ahead and lead us off on target audience discussion, please.
Yeah, so obviously you understand your prospects well. The seniors themselves. There's 2 points that I think are just worth emphasizing. One is, think of them as very experienced consumers. They've been enticed and refused to be enticed by marketing all along. So you want to be mindful of, this is a very experienced person I'm dealing with. And then I also make the operating presumption that they are smarter than me. They've been successful. Otherwise, we wouldn't be marketing to them. And then if you just keep those 2 things in mind. And then you have the joint thing of the adult children, and can be the exact same person. In other words, often, our adult children that we're involved with or also have kids in schools, or maybe they just finished schools and are looking for that first job or considering graduate school. In my opinion, women do all the important work in the world. And so you see these representation here primarily of women. And then there's a picture of me from a few years ago, sort of the no good son who gets involved periodically. But one final point on this would just be about 15% of the moves to independent living even independent living, the, the senior was introduced by the family member. And I think we can, I don't have any date on this, but I expect we'll see that go up as people focus on the important things. Family connections might be more important, and people might leave Florida to go to other places, back to where they were, to the family, in greater numbers. That's just a guess on my part, but that's something I think we're going to see. Joe, do you want to talk to us about for your market?
Yeah, and I mean, I think the overlaps are obvious here with the graphic that everyone's seeing. The adult child and the parent are largely the target audience, but I think both industries are challenged equally in not only messaging to the adult children and the parents, but also to the students and the seniors. We can't avoid consideration to the actual beneficiary of the services or offerings that we're putting out there for the market to engage with. So it makes messaging a real bear for both of us. I think key to creating messaging that is going to motivate and inspire your prospects to act is to understand your target audiences as well as you possibly can. Rob opened up with the analysis and research and in demographics and in your market. Like you do need to tap into big data to understand who these folks are, what motivates them, in order to be effective in your messaging. So our work, we look clearly at the psychodemographics of the target audience. Our market is fast growing to be the millennial generation, born between 1981 and 1996. They make up over 73 million people in the US. That is the largest demographic segment of our population. They will become senior living's target market in fast order. And I think the thing that I'll leave you with is just make sure that you understand them well enough to have confidence in the messages that you're developing so that you can be as effective as possible.
Terrific. So Rob talked a little bit about the need to move beyond the generic, of really thinking about, who is going to thrive in your community and reaching out to them. And this is in line with, we can't inspire everybody to move. So you have two examples here on the left. This is the Overlook in central Massachusetts. It's 450 acres. It's not in a highly populated area, kind of a destination, if you will. And it features walking trails and, healthy exercise. And the people who live there really generate a lot of their own fun. They started their own brewery, for example, and so forth. It's that kind of atmosphere. And then on the right, this is John Knox Village in Pompano Beach on the Atlantic coast. And it is heavily influenced by the cultural richness of Miami and takes full advantage of that. And water sports, those kinds of things are very important to them. So make sure that's really driven home in your messaging would be my point here. Who thrives in your community? Who is it for?
Yeah, and these are two educational examples to continue to make the point. At Creosote, we're big fans of Simon Sinek. If you know the book Start With Why, I think it's appropriate for developing messages. You need to understand why your customer cares about what it is that you deliver as an organization. It's not necessarily your value proposition it really is your promise to the market. What are you promising every day that you deliver for your customer or for the consumer? So on the left is a school in Litchfield, Connecticut that specializes in education for children who are diagnosed with significant learning differences. And they flat out come out and say, we are the best educators at providing the necessary strategies that these children are going to need to be successful in college and in life. So that is a big why. The example on the right-hand side is Marietta College in Ohio, small liberal arts institution that prides itself on the relationships that students develop with faculty. So contrary to the experience at a large university where freshmen, sophomores are going to be in a classroom of 200 to 500 kids being led by a teaching assistant. At Marietta, you have access to expert faculty, which their promise is that leads to better preparation for career and life. Those are pretty significant whys.
So, we talked a little bit about it, who to talk to, about sort of specifying that audience, who thrives, what do you talk to them about? And, it's important to note that this time it's undeniable that people face more challenges in their decision to join your community. Despite the, with everything that's going on, it's harder to make that decision and to go ahead and make that decision to join now. So we're advising and seeing success with talk about the important things, the most important things, the things at the top of Maslow's pyramid. I think society in general is thinking about the important things. I certainly am in my life. What is important to me? And the fact is that in your environment, you have the place where people have high esteem. That's been built by the way your associates and their neighbors react to them, and they are, they can be who they want to be, who they want to become, and they're really among the few parts of society actually can really have an opportunity to be at the top of that pyramid. So speak to them in those terms. It will make overcoming all the hurdles associated with joining the community much easier for them to surmount. If they know, I'm going to really be operating at the top. I'm going to be who I want to be. So what changes it make? This is another question to ask yourself as you're thinking about messaging. What change is it going to make in their lives? You have two examples here on the left. This is Westminster Canterbury Richmond. This community just recently opened a spiritual center. That speaks volumes about the community. The values of the people are very much shared there. It permeates the culture. There is that kind of feel to the place. That's the kind of people who are going to be comfortable there, who are going to thrive there. On the right, this is Blue Skies of Texas. This is a community filled with enthusiastic people. Certainly they share values, but the common denominator when you go there is energy and enthusiasm. If they're interested, these gentlemen interested in flying model planes, they take that seriously. They're interested in the bike club, they're biking 25 miles a week with the club. They take it seriously. So again, think about that. What change does it make in their lives, and focus on that. Those are the people who will be inspired to move. Those are the kind of messages that will inspire them to overcome all the hurdles associated with joining the community.
And just to piggyback on Dan's comments, I mean, in the education field, we talk about the difference that it makes in their lives. What's the outcome of the benefits that you offer? So I think when you're still thinking about generating messaging during the pandemic, keep that in mind. And, you have to be authentic to what it is that you can actually deliver right now. And, as we shared earlier, it's incredibly important to communicate the value that exists given whatever the circumstances are currently. I think Dan and Rob and I joked in talking about this webinar, like, I don't like the idea of pivoting. To me, that's just spinning in one place and not moving forward. I think the key point in being authentic to your market is be authentic to what it is that you're delivering right now, but make sure you're communicating your value. So this is a video for the Academy of the Holy Cross. It's an all-girls Catholic high school just outside of DC, and it's part of a messaging campaign to clearly communicate key strengths during their distance learning program. The first being that students are still learning at an advanced level. The second being students are actually having fun learning in a distance learning program. And last, that these students are still part of a community, even though they're learning at home. And long and short of it is that what we're trying to communicate and demonstrate to the market is that Holy Cross is still worth the cost of tuition.
Doing Gay-Lussac's law of gases over top of the campus.
We might not be spending our days where we all love to learn, share, run, sing, and laugh.
Instead, we're facing a new challenge. But you should know, you can always count on girls.
No matter where we are going to be there.
To lift others up and be true to your faith.
We'll make sure you're never alone, even when we're apart.
We're going to be there to challenge and teach each other.
To prove that where you learn doesn't limit what you learn.
We'll inspire you if you need encouragement, with the support of an entire school full of girls.
As a girl, you have power within you, and it has never been more important to share it.
Be empowered.
So another way of just demonstrating the authenticity, and we do encourage everybody, tell the authentic stories. If you're in a community, the stories are right in front of you, so tell those stories. But another aspect of authenticity is simple messages, stripping back some of the marketing veneer, have a lot of impact. And that they always have, but now particularly, we're used to seeing television shows, news broadcasts shot out of people's houses, all kinds of television shows, people interested in authenticity. Polish is probably almost a negative at this point. So this was a webinar at the Overlook, one simple email to its lead list, 59 attendees, and we rate there's an attentiveness scale on webinars with the software we use, and had 100%. So 100% of the people paid attention, lasted through the webinar and the question and answer session. But again, just a simple email tipped that all off, got that going.
All right, so to try and summarize that before we transition, as we're working on this presentation, I remember it was almost 20 years ago when I was doing presentations to clients, to associations on branding and positioning in the senior living field, where I always use the example of, consider the Baltimore Orioles retirement community. Of course, I'm in Maryland, I'm a huge Orioles fan. So I don't know that this concept would appeal to many others, but consider the community that's located here. Residents regularly go to games, players and retired players regularly visit the campus. Maybe even some live there, and you just have you can imagine the thematic visual environment of such a place. that's definitely a niche audience. Now, that may not be the best niche audience, but it illustrates the point of, for most of the past 20 years, our communities, many of, I don't mean to make a blanket statement to everyone, but many of our communities have evolved their positioning kind of along the lines of more and better. All right, we now have a bigger, nicer fitness center. We now have a bigger, nicer pool. We now have 3 dining areas, including, you know, a pizza oven and so forth. And these things are all great. They all work to you know, create a good experience at the community. But they're things that everybody in the market tends to pick up on and do. And what we've not so much done is really figure out, how do we be different? And as competition in the field continues to grow, not just from more communities, but from all the options that are rapidly growing over the past decade, will continue to grow to help people stay at home longer. That's a major facet of competition for us. How do we evolve our communities to truly target a specific and distinct niche in our market? It's a growing market, and we can do that, and really get, you know, attract people who, you know, want to be in that niche. That's just a major challenge for our field. So figuring out that messaging for your community and what then you need to do to bring that to life is kind of step 1 in the process. Step 2, once you've got that messaging strategy in place, is how do you deliver it? How do you take that message out to the market? And Dan, sorry, I'm 1 slide early. So the 5 facets of this that Joe and Dan are going to walk through, from just the interpersonal way of communications, virtual, how the importance of video in communications, digital opportunities, digital channels, traditional media like print and direct mail. How do all these, you know, various options fit into a communications strategy, and how we take that message out? So Dan, if you could lead us off.
Yeah, so, you know, in our field, as everyone on the webinar knows, it's the personal communications, it's the relationship between the individual prospect and the salesperson that in large measure makes the difference. So one of the things, if you're not doing this, I encourage you to look at this, is an email service like BombBomb that lets a salesperson establish a personal connection, even from the initial email or from the initial exchange, where they can see you and get comfortable with you and know who am I talking to. That means a lot. And then obviously FaceTime, Zoom, anything to have that personal connection. And I think of it sometimes a little bit as a blue sky sale. You know, you bring people into a welcome center and you're face to face, but you really have an opportunity to get to know the person, what they want to become, what their fears are, what their aspirations are, what the challenges are. And this is a time that you really want to personally focus on these things. And you'll find, our clients are finding, a willing audience who is, you know, anxious to talk to someone, likes the idea that someone really cares about them, appreciates the idea they're thinking about the future. So I think of it as a relationship building that's similar to the blue skies, but use the technology. You know, there was a lot of concern. We did a survey before one of our other webinars about whether older people would use the technology. And actually, we're finding they are in good numbers, and certainly some that are not, and you still have to use that phone. But we're seeing good attendance at things, and so use the technology. But take the time to listen, to really establish that relationship. It will pay off dramatically.
You know, I actually don't like the word virtual, but this is a term that I think everybody has embraced, and they're using it in a way that is just not in person. To me, virtual is putting on VR goggles and, you know, experiencing something completely not real. But, you know, before I begin this, I'd like to just reiterate something that Rob said, and In our work for education, there's two key strategies that you have to identify to be successful in your marketing, your branding, your advertising, whatever you want to call it. And that is a marketing strategy, right? You've got to get the message to the right people, those that you are targeting, the most likely to consider what you have to offer. And the second is a creative strategy, which is equally as important these days. So your message can arrive to the right target market, but if it doesn't actually engage them and move them to the action that you desire them to take, then you failed. Now you could have a great message and great creative strategy and not reach the right audience. The point I'm making is you really need both to be effective today. And in the current circumstances where marketing is really being, consumers are critical of every marketing effort. You've got to be sensitive to what's going on, but you still have to engage them emotionally, I believe. So what I've got here for you is an example of Georgia Tech's virtual information session. So key to the admissions process, I'm sure, a parallel between senior living and education is an admission event. It can be a personal tour of a community. It can be an accepted students day, whatever the case may be. Between March and now, those events were restricted at colleges and universities and independent schools all over the country. Couldn't do them. So what Georgia Tech did is they created video information sessions so that when you received an email to an event, it would lead you to a page on their website where you could personally choose an area of interest and then click on that area of interest, and you would get a recorded information session that may include faculty, so you get an idea of the people that will be teaching you. It can include student panels, so that you can see the kind of kids that are part of this program, and can you see yourself being alongside of them as a classmate or a roommate. The point here is the admissions process and the admissions events that have been highly successful, I think, for both our industries need rethinking and are likely to continue to evolve to be something very different than what they have been in the past. So use technology, create a virtual experience for your prospects to be able to understand what it's like to join your community.
So one way of getting that, and we're going to take a risk here and show a few seconds of a video here, but I have another video. But a point I want to make about video is using the right tools and the editing skill and the ability to moderate sound and so forth. You can create a very effective video very inexpensively and quickly. Video could be shot on a cell phone now. It wasn't that long ago there was $30,000 camera to get that kind of video. It can be distributed easily through file sharing services. You can use the Ken Burns style of moving over still photos to communicate motion. There are abundant sources of stock photo you can put together. So we put together this video for a client, Harmony Senior Services, and we basically laid out talking points, collected some video from them that they had used in social, combined it with some stock video that was available from a service, and put together a very effective video that's had high impact for them. We can run a little bit of it, Rob, that'd be great. And then I'll just close with one other bit of information on this.
So we've been in healthcare now for over 50 years. We have 2,300 plus employees, and we have almost 3,000 or more residents. And then we have the families. So we're touching on a daily basis pretty close to 9,000 people. And it's a job that we take quite seriously. The question became, how do you make the impact, and how do you give a gift to really provide the care and support that you want to provide? You know, at this particular time, my concern was, what could I personally do to help? I could take and provide all the protective equipment necessary for the caregivers. We brought extra food. We did things that we could buy and do in the facility. The best way for me to help, in my mind, was to help the people that were providing the care. As the schools closed and as different things happened that surrounded our caregivers, many of our caregivers are single parents, and all of a sudden the burden of child care fell on them. So I was looking at a way that I could deliver some type of support directly to the people that was taking care of people. What would be your dream as you go through this journey of life? You want to live a long, healthy, prosperous life. That's the dream that I built Harmony around, and your life becomes longer and better.
So
to my earlier comment about playback of video.
Yes. And if anybody on the call knows of a startup company that solved this, I would like to invest my home equity in that in that organization. And my final point, though, is, you can string together a video like this. This is, I forget what it is, 2.5 minutes in total or something like that, basically, and use snippets very powerfully in social media and emails and so forth. So you can kind of get a video together that on its own has impact, but then the snippets are available as well.
Yeah, I just want to emphasize the lack of investment that is needed to produce great video these days, as long as you don't play it in PowerPoint. But, the example that I showed earlier of the Academy of the Holy Cross, that was self-captured footage that the girls from that school provided to us, and and our video editing team pieced together that into a narrative that really tells a great story, and at a really small investment for the client, and that kind of leads right into social media. And one other point that I think is important in all of these strategies, we often get the questions from our clients, well, what's the most effective strategy, Joe? Like, what should we dump all of our money into? And the fact is, there isn't one way to, meet all your marketing, enrollment, admission goals in terms of the channel that you invest in. They're all important, but clearly you have to invest where I think you can see the most return on it. And digital and video have proven to be highly effective. I think the latest statistic, videos on a website allow for conversion from a website visitor to an intended action. That could be fill out a form, inquire, improves that conversion by close to 80%. So if you're not investing in video, you really should consider it. This should play back okay. Is a short social media clip that was a post part of a campaign for Old Trail School in the Ohio Cuyahoga National Park. And it's intended to clearly communicate that the school is reopening with in-person instruction and how safely they're doing it, given the ability to spread the kids out, to use the resources of their campus in a way that specifically public schools are unable to do. So if you want to try to play that, Rob, hopefully it works. There is no sound.
Okay, so I was just gonna make sure everybody knew that there's be no sound with this one.
So that was part of an overall campaign that included blog posts, email marketing, and paid social media. You know, the challenge for lots of parents everywhere right now is the fact that if you have a child or children, you know, who are young, say, you know, preschool to grade 3, they are incredibly burdened by not being able to send their children to school and have in-person instruction. So it's a huge advantage in areas where public schools are not reopening with in-person instruction, and we're exploiting that for Old Trail, and it's working to you know, a great advantage for them.
Right, before we go on to the last category, I'd just like to add another thought. You know, a lot of the focus here is on digital communications. And while we and many others in the field have really been working hard on trying to get our clients more and more digital, our field largely in many ways has been a little bit resistant to really, you know, going all out into the digital side, you know, saying that our market just isn't there. Well, while there might have been an element of truth to that 6 months or more ago, we just got back another survey. I just saw the first data, preliminary data from it yesterday. And one of the key findings was that prior to the COVID time period, about 30% had engaged in some sort of video conference, Zoom style, you know, call or communications. More than 50% of the respondents have now done that during this time. And only a very small percentage have not done it and really aren't interested in it, and almost negligible. There are some who still haven't done it but want to. And several other things I won't go into too much time, but the point being, there's a lot of evidence that we're getting various ways that our market is now online. Any, you know, resistance to the learning curve, you know, for the vast majority of our prospect, it's really gone away these last several months. And there really is an opportunity to use this tool to much greater extent in the senior living field. That said, we'll now transition back to the more traditional side of things. Joe?
Yeah, and Rob, I would, you know, just capitalize on your comments there by saying, if you're not investing in SEO, search engine optimization, so that you're found through the digital landscape, I would focus on that. It's incredibly important, and the algorithms that all the search engines use constantly change. Go to an expert if you don't have expertise inside or internally as part of your staff. Get somebody who knows that to be able to help you so that they do arrive at the digital strategies that you've created to engage your audiences. And back to the traditional, though, I mean, it still works for colleges and universities. You know, every year, high school students graduate, and high school students want to learn about colleges. There's more than 4,000 institutions of higher education in the country, and I would venture to guess that the common person probably can't name more than 50. So there is a huge lack of awareness. E-Town, most of you probably don't know this, but that's Elizabethtown College in Pennsylvania. They just flat out are promoting a virtual opportunity for students to learn about their school. Maybe it's a whole lot more efficient this way for students to actually engage with schools. Ithaca College, another example, like they want you to understand what it's like to be part of their community, but you're not allowed to come to campus. So when visiting isn't an option, in-person visits are not an option, then visit them virtually.
All right. So we promised you at the beginning, wrapping up with some actionable takeaways. So before we transition into the question and answer period, Dan, why don't you lead us off again with your key thoughts for today?
Yeah, just some reminders when we talked about, focus on who will thrive in your community. You can attract everybody. Rob, I think, really summed it up well, that we have enough population now to serve niches and find who's going to thrive. And if you're in an existing community, look who's thriving now. That's really going to tell you the answer to that question. I contend we've undersold for years. The experience is transformational. I think this accounts for why when you walk down the hall, people say, I should have moved earlier. I think they just experience something that they could not imagine when they get there, that what they are able to do, how they are using their time and energy has changed so dramatically. And we don't talk about that enough, I don't think. And then if you're not experimenting and embracing these new approaches, the cost, as Joe talked about, has come way down, and there's more risk associated with not experimenting than there is with investing, because we're talking about investing relatively small sums of money to move prospects forward.
Great, Joe?
Yeah, so at CRESO, our work is, our effectiveness is based on our ability to explore and understand the brand of an organization or an institution. And to build a strong brand, you have to be able to empathize with your customer. You have to understand what their challenges are. And perhaps amidst the pandemic, this is maybe the most important thing for you to consider in developing new messages that will inspire your prospects to do something that you want them to do. You have to empathize with them. You have to understand the challenges that they're facing so you can communicate effectively with them. I think touching on those societal issues, again, education is being looked at to participate and advance these conversations with young people to make the change that most people believe is needed within society. So empathy is huge in building strong brands. I think to be effective in your messaging, in your branding, in your advertising, you have to advocate for your customer. So again, in developing effective messaging, stand by your audiences. I like to use the Red Bull analogy. You don't have to advertise on a balloon that goes to the edge of space when somebody jumps out of it to be advocates for your market, but you do have to help them succeed. And that kind of plays into the curate. There are key touch points for key messages in the admissions process, in the fundraising process. You have to be able to identify those opportunities, those touch points. Where is it important to deliver the messages? And then what is the right message? Don't deliver all of your messages at one time. Curate the messages, make them simple and clear so audiences know that you're providing benefits that allow them to reach their own personal goals. And I'll just close with thanking everybody for joining. I hope you learned something useful in your day-to-day today, and I really hope that your communities are safe and healthy during this unprecedented time. I don't know whether you feel this way, but I'm ready for precedented time to return.
Great. And Joe, your points here, I think just apply totally to senior living as well. So we are going to shift into the Q&A part in just a moment. First, I know that a number of people do tend to drop out at this point and not go into the Q&A. So two things before we lose you. First, I just really would like to thank Joe again for joining us today. We've had about 150 people with us today. Mostly almost all from senior living, not very many that would be potential clients for Joe. So the fact that he's taken this time and energy and help us create this and share this with you today, all of us at Loving Company are hugely appreciative of that, Joe. Thank you. The other thing is just, and I don't normally plug this, but I do want to do it this time for a reason. All of you attending today will get a questionnaire asking for feedback on how you thought about things. And because we did this time reach outside of senior living and bring in a guest speaker, we really would love to hear your feedback on, was this effective? Was it helpful? Is it something we should continue to do more of? So we ask you, please do go ahead and fill out the questionnaire. So with that, we are going to shift into the Q&A. Okay, Dan, I think this comes straight to you. People don't waste time. They go straight to the bottom line. Are organizations having success in getting new move-ins now?
They are. The communities that our clients who kept marketing, who kept the investment at a reasonable level, didn't slash the budget, continued to reach out to people who would thrive in their communities and all the rest, have seen solid move-ins, almost returning to pre-COVID move-ins in both June and July. There was definitely a dip in April and May, no doubt, while they, we were mobilizing alongside them, but we are seeing move-ins from people who kept going. And so I know some people, I looked at the list of attendees, and some of you are in the sales and marketing and in the trenches, but pass that along to your CFOs and CEOs that it's not fatal. Like, the market has been damaged, but not decimated, and you can inspire people to move at this time.
So many of you that are with us today are on our email list. That's how you got the notification of this. Based on that question, I just want to let you know that we are having one of our normal emails go out tomorrow, and the lead article in that I just was given shortly before the webinar this morning to review and get approved for that. And it focuses on exactly this topic. What are we seeing with our clients on move-ins, deposits for expansions, appointments, calls, all that kind of data. So keep an eye out for that tomorrow. It'll share more real detail on that. Another question, Dan, well, I guess it's to all of us, but I'll give you the opportunity to go first. You said we need to use a variety of message platforms such as digital, video, traditional, etc. How would you rank the platforms to reach parents and adult childs? Which are the most adult children? Which are the most important to focus on for that segment of the market?
Well, I think the digital, particularly if you're talking about paid media advertising, reaches both segments. I mean, that's going to reach your prospects and the adult children. You have to take them into account. All of these, other than the only one I would say that I would not be focused on the adult children on, just because it's very difficult to do it cost effectively, would be direct mail. Everything else can cross both. Direct mail, the numbers are going to be huge, that you're going to get, and you can't really buy a very good list of people who have parents who live in the area. So you have a lot of waste with that. So direct mail, I would restrict only people who have raised their hand or are already in your lead base, but all the others reach across the board.
All right. Another good question here. How can I get my community's leadership on board with shifting marketing messaging? Send them the link to this video, to this webinar when you get it, and lock them down to listen to it. No, I'm kind of kidding, but it's a great question. And Joe, you probably face that same thing with a lot of your university markets. You work heavily, I'm making some assumptions here, with the admissions departments, marketing departments, but what is that influence of leadership at organizations and at various institutions, and is there a parallel there for us?
I believe there is. Unfortunately, I think education is about 10 or 15 years behind in the branding conversation. They haven't had to rely on marketing specifically, during, the surge of students and the availability of money to pay tuition, through the 70s, 80s, 90s, although there were some downturns there. And I think what leadership is still struggling with is, and I think Dan touched on it earlier, marketing is kind of a dirty word for schools. Brand is not embraced. They believe that the faculty and the programs that they have should just attract all the customers that they need. And, I think there's research out there, data, that marketers are one of the most hated professions, and career choice. It's politicians, it's lawyers, and it's marketers. So it's understandable that leadership at times struggles to make the investment in marketing and brand, but it is absolutely necessary these days. People don't just purchase products and services. They align their own personal values to organizational values that have the same things. So conveying those values and how they align with your market, I think, is critical, and that is branding, and leadership should get on board.
And let me add one thing, Rob, is that if you're in our field, that talk the talk of the CEOs and the CFOs, and so part of that talk is, what is the return on investment? We're going to spend X and we're going to get Y in revenue, or that's the language. So if you're not translating the language into that format, I'd encourage you to work a little bit on that, because it often can be viewed by people, even in senior leadership positions with a lot of experience, as a pure expense. And so this is an expense. It's an expense on the books, and we're going to slash that. That's what we're doing, and we're going to slash that. But if you can talk in terms of return on investment, we do this, we get X leads, we get X sales, we collect Y dollars. That'll help you.
Yeah, I think that plays back to, what strategies do you prioritize? I think for your own job security as marketing and communications professionals, right, when you can demonstrate ROI on efforts that you've deployed, I think that clearly shows a wise investment.
Great. I have another question here. In my community, we've seen an uptick in sales and move-ins from the current lead base. How are other communities faring with new lead development? We have seen a downturn in new leads, even with SEO, direct mail, etc. And I know I mentioned that newsletter that's coming out tomorrow, it's going to include a number of stats from us. And I know we are seeing communities that are having good experience with new lead generation. And a lot of it has been affected by how have they approached marketing and sales? How have they approached their investment? How have they approached the types of things that they're doing during these last several months? And it's kind of funny, Dan and I are giving another webinar tomorrow, and I kind of wish I could go grab one of the graphs from that, because it shows 4 clients of ours, 2 of which got very kind of nervous about everything and wanted to pull back and shut down marketing and not do anything. And not surprisingly, their lead generation fell off dramatically from January, February, March to April and May. And then we had a couple other clients that said, okay, this is the new world. We're here, we're in business, we have to stay in business. We're going to aggressively approach these new techniques, new challenges. And their lead generation, new lead generation for the second quarter of the year, which was April, May, and June, was significantly greater than it was for the first quarter of the year. So a lot depends on how the community approaches it. But yes, communities are seeing increases in leads. Dan, would you like to add anything to that?
The specific I would add, if I heard the question right, that I didn't see necessarily mentioned, was where we're seeing the uptick is by really focusing on paid digital, meaning Google and Facebook. Those are delivering leads, and some of our clients have shifted more resources from that because they're seeing that return on investment. Others just maintained it, and by really focusing on that program and monitoring closely and looking at every opportunity of kind of wringing more out of those dollars, we're seeing leads shift from that. And our clients have been doing less direct mail, frankly, kind of restarting now, starting to see that restart kind of in September. We hadn't seen much direct mail, but the lead volume had been mostly bolstered by that paid digital programs.
I have a question for Rob and Dan in regards to this conversation. Can you give, I'm interested in the sense in the investment needed to really see, a return on, paid digital placement? Because I have a lot of my clients who are saying, I want to kind of tiptoe into it versus committing to a significant campaign that then, you can have reliable data based on performance over a longer period of time. Just curious whether you guys have kind of a recommendation for the level of commitment for digital.
I think I'll let Rob weigh in too, but from my end, I think the answer is this. The answer is a little bit more, maybe a little bit more complicated than just throwing out a dollar figure. I think you need to look at it and say, okay, what are we specifically trying to achieve, and where do we want to have that impact? So we would recommend, everything from a pretty targeted, where I would start probably is a pretty targeted direct campaign using Google AdWords text only. That would be a way to get that and say, okay, we want to check reactions when people were searching on colleges in my area or something, and monitor that. That's the way I would stick my toe in the water and kind of go from there. Can you get a direct response to a different thing? And you do have to invest enough to say, okay, we're going to get some traction on that. We're going to look at how many searches there have been to see we can get enough traction on there to get a measurable response back. But that's how I would progress through the program, is saying, what specifically are my goals? What terms do I want to own? Let's experiment with that. We'll see the direct impact, or we won't very quickly. That's the great thing about paid digital. They either salute or they don't. Quickly.
Right, and To put some dollars out there, well, first let me just say, there are two components when you think about digital marketing, like the Google and Facebook and kind of things that Dan's been talking about. One component is the actual spend that gets invested in the media that is generating responses. The other part of the cost is who's planning and managing it, strategizing the ads, placing it, picking those keywords, managing all of that process for it. And the amount of time it takes to plan, manage, report, adjust, and all of that is contingent on how much is actually being placed. So those two kind of relate to each other. But I'll just focus on the placement side right now. And most of our clients are doing, I would say, and Dan, you might know this better than me, but at least 2,000 to 3,000 a month in actual paid media, things that are generating return and getting people to click and come through and become leads. Now we have some clients that are investing a lot more than that and getting a lot more in return for it at cost per leads that are very low. Again, I saw something yesterday, and it's escaping me exactly what it was, but it was, I know, it was a community, a series of communities that we work with. It in July got, I think, more than 457 digital leads, direct leads and inquiries at an average cost per lead of only $53, $54 a lead. And that's pretty incredible cost per lead, way lower than we ever see for traditional advertising or direct mail. So that just illustrates the kind of return that can be generated from that. It appears we've run out of questions. We're at about 1:15, a little after now. So unless any last minute ones come in, again, I would like to thank all of you in the audience today for spending your time with us and attending this. And many of you have been to other webinars, and we hope this has been a good one for you. I would like to thank Dan for all the time and effort. This is really his brainchild of bringing this today and sharing this with you. And obviously, once again, Joe, thank you very much for all the time and effort you've put into this. And of course, as I say that, boom, one last question pops up on the screen. Do you all foresee any trends changing in this industry due to this? For example, we have historically seen our larger, more expensive inventory having the longest waiting list. Do you think we will see trends towards that changing and possibly gravitating towards smaller inventory? Well, this goes way beyond sort of the messaging side of things. This is more in my area on the development side. And this is another one of those things I can only really give a brief answer right now because there's so many different things that affect this. And that's the changing, what will the wealth profile look like of our prospects in our market 5 years from now and 10 years from now? We're getting more and more people that really fit more of a greater proportion of the population, the aging population, that would fit more of a middle market product and is not going to be able to afford larger, more expensive inventory. And that's a very real thing. But at the same time, we're talking about by far the largest generation of individuals that we've ever seen come into senior living. So even the roughly maybe 20 or 25% that can afford our communities and can afford pretty much anything we have to offer, there are a lot of them. And so that may not shift demand that much. But there are so many other societal factors as well, including the proportion of residents that are single, whether it's widowed or divorced. That's increasing more and more. And that's a factor that we definitely see having an influence on the residents mix in the future. 20 years ago, we were really getting rid of studios. They were just an outdated type of product that many communities were struggling with. Today, we're facing that same challenge with straight 1-bedroom, 1-bath residents that may be 600 or 700 square feet. There's just not a lot of demand for that, particularly with all the technology, the digital side of things we've been talking about. Everybody has their laptop, everybody has their home office and things. The 1-bedroom den with 1.5 baths I would not be surprised if within the next 5 years, for communities that invest in the development of these, if that might not become the most popular residence over the 2-bedroom with den, really largest. Because that 1-bedroom den is not only really good for that single person, but there are a lot of couples that may have not as strong of a wealth profile that could also move in and flourish in a 1-bedroom den. I shouldn't call it the den, it's the office, the study. They'd be in that environment. So I don't really see the things we've talked about today in terms of the COVID era, the post-COVID environment, really having a significant impact on residents mix and consumer demand. I think it's really more just the general demographic changes, which is a whole nother conversation. So I hope that helped a little bit there. So again, thank you to everyone and take care. And we really appreciate you spending this last hour and 21 minutes with us. Take care.